So this is a Digital Music Trends at Midem 2013, and I'm here with Helienne Lindvall, who is a writer for The Guardian. Of course, many of you will know her for her columns on The Guardian, and also a singer-songwriter. So hi, Helienne, and how's it going today?
Very well.
So,
very early.
Yeah.
A bit tired.
Exactly. I hear you arrived fairly late last night, so...
Sorry?
I hear you arrived fairly late last night, so
Yes.
yeah, exactly. Cool. So, today you were actually on one of the panels that are probably going to be written most about from Midem, because it had some fairly heavyweight people on it, starting with European Commissioner Michel Barnier, and also Paul McGuinness and Axel Dauchez from CEO of Deezer. So tell me a little bit about your experience on the panel. What was your angle on it, and how did you feel about that?
Well, first of all, it's the first time I've met Michel Barnier,
Sure.
and I think his speech was really encouraging, and I really, really hope that he will succeed in implementing what he was talking about. And it was really good to hear somebody that actually seemed to be on the side of creators,
Yeah.
and to seem to understand the reality that we're facing, and in so many ways. It's one of the few times I've heard something coming out of Brussels that, because a lot of the times we feel like we're being just completely bombarded by people who are just completely pro-tech but not pro-content.
Yeah.
And I think he understood the problems we're facing when it comes to pan-European licensing, which of course there are things that we can do on the side of, me as a songwriter, which is that I was there in the capacity of a songwriter. I could certainly appreciate if there would be more transparency and accountability amongst collection societies. Because some are a lot better than others.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not going to name names, but there are certain countries where I never see anything, and there's certain countries where the reporting is really, really good.
Absolutely.
And I think that needs to be streamlined, and there needs to be accountability. And he seemed to understand that, and that would be good for music services as well. We'd be able to do pan-European licenses, much more streamlined. Money would actually get to the people who created the content.
Yeah.
So I feel really, really positive about that. I think that what Paul also brought up, Paul McGuinness, I think he said he wasn't going to do any Google bashing, but is always the key word for that.
Yeah.
I think that we need, and he seemed to understand that there needs to be, it can't be so one-sided for a few conglomerates or corporations against something that Europe is very, very good at, which is content creation.
Absolutely.
I think we're punching above our weight a lot, and we also have a history of respecting authors' rights. And it would be terrible, like horrendous, if we threw all that out because we thought that maybe we could get in the league of a Google revenue, which is not going to happen if we don't actually pay for content, because content costs money.
And in that light, was there any mention of the problems between YouTube and GEMA, for example?
No, there was nobody from Germany. On the panel.
Yeah.
I do think, however, that there are parts of the problem with YouTube and GEMA that are never being discussed.
Yeah.
That are not. It's not all GEMA's fault.
Yeah.
One of the things that GEMA is pushing for is, which I also brought up, about non-disclosure agreements.
Sure.
For as a creator, it's insane that we don't know what our royalties are based on. What is the how many streams does that? With YouTube, it's completely opaque.
Black box. Yeah.
Yeah, it's black. Well, how are we going to trust? We don't know where that money got stuck. We don't know if we get paid right. And with GEMA, they refuse to do a non-disclosure agreement, and that is one of the big problems between YouTube, and because as anybody knows, YouTube does non-disclosure agreements with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of an interesting point, because yesterday was at the $100 billion dollar music business, where they were looking at ways in which the industry can grow to a $100 billion dollar business in the world from the 71 that it is today. And it was impressive to see how much of the conversation revolved around YouTube. I mean, of course, one of the YouTube guys was on the panel, but it was interesting to see how much people are relying on that sort of channel to expand massively, to the point that it can actually increase the overall revenues of the industry. What's your thoughts on that as becoming a main source of income for somebody like yourself as well?
I think it's dangerous to rely on one company for that much of the revenue. It puts I believe in competition and in choice. I think that we need a lot more players, and to encourage people and new companies. And it was something that Deezer brought up. Axel brought up at the conference that it's not a level playing field.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for new players to come in.
In the video space,
in particular,
impossible.
when you also have, if you think of, if I would compare Deezer and Spotify to YouTube, with Deezer and Spotify, we have a choice to say yes or no. That's the leverage, you know. And if we don't want our music to be on Spotify, Spotify will not have it on there.
Yeah.
With YouTube, there is no such choice. Your music will be up there whether you like it or not. So you could either choose to get into business with them, or try to file takedown notices, which of course is doesn't work at all.
If you are an artist with any traction, it's not going to work. You know, if you're a small artist, maybe you can do
not even, believe me, not even if you're a small artist.
Okay. Then it's...
But so it's not. There's no leverage in the you know, that's not how you conduct a.
And there isn't really any one company that can expect to compete with YouTube on the video delivery front, because you know the just the server costs alone of what the operation is.
Vivo, and where they kind of work in partnerships, and I think, you know, it's good that Vivo exists, and you know, I think that obviously YouTube is a great platform. I do think that if somebody's going to be that dominant in a field, there needs to be some regulation, and there needs to be some insight.
Yeah, of course. And talking about streaming services, of course, you know, they are also been pinned as one of the great saviors of industry, in inverted commas, because a lot of people are converting to streaming. Of course, we're far from that going mainstream, but we're seeing in the Nordic countries that's becoming really an important and one of the main sources of revenue for musicians. So how do you see this fight playing out, where there's still a big space? So, you know, we're from the UK, so we see how physical is still fairly dominant in the marketplace, as much as people are you know, playing it down. There's
we'll see what happens with HMV.
Exactly, yeah.
Might have a big effect on, you know, if you can't buy records,
what's going to happen? The download market and the streaming market, and a lot of people talking about how people are maybe bypassing the download phase, and they're just going straight from buying CDs to the streaming play. Do you think that's something that maybe there may be some truth in that?
See, I think sometimes we in the music industry are so kind of insular in being quite huge music consumers and searching out music in much more than the average Joe Schmo or the average public, and also possibly a bit more technologically advanced. And I think that you brought up Sweden or Scandinavia, and I think, I mean, I've looked at that. I'm Swedish originally, and so I spend a lot of time there. I go up there working. I belong to STIM, the Collection Society. So, and I do think that one of the reasons that Sweden is doing so well is you know, it's a technologically advanced country. It's a quite wealthy country. So iPhones, and, you know, people have smartphones. The penetration is almost, you know, 100%. So for something like Spotify, then that it's a great. I mean, a big selling point for Spotify is to have all that music on your mobile
Sure,
phone.
of course.
But you look in other countries, you look in the UK, but where you also have to think of, how can you. What's the broadband? What's the how's the access going to be? Even if you have a smartphone, are people going to be? I think there are still a lot of people that are going to want to own the music.
Yeah.
And there's still probably a little bit of kind of hesitance about. If you make all these playlists and you pay in all this money, and then at the end, if the company goes under, which God forbid, we hope they don't, what's going to happen to all of that?
Sure, and there's a lot of talk about the value of the content and the value of music as it's been streamed or consumed as video or downloaded. There's also another big value that maybe it's not been talked about as much, but is inherent in everything that we're hearing here, which is the value of the data that's been pulled from everything that's happening. And there's a lot of companies that are exploiting this data, that are making sure that they gather everything, that they make that available commercially for artists to understand what's happening to their music, how it's been consumed, what are the spikes, where is it going, where is it doing well. So how do you see the value of that data sitting in the equation of the music industry? And is the industry missing out, giving in a way giving away all that value to third-party companies to keep track of all that?
I think that there's been a lot of attention paid to that particular part, and I think that a lot of companies will kind of try to use it. Even you'll get. We'll get back to YouTube. That they will have that as the kind of leverage. Yes, but you do know, we can give you analytics that will show you where these people are streaming your music, and even Pandora wants to, use that as a kind of excuse for not paying us correctly. But sorry, that's my personal opinion. But I think that there's a part that is not being addressed as much if we're now getting into streaming as the main consumption, is how do you become a star? How do you promote yourself on a platform like that? How do you get people to, because the general public, I would say, listen to radio because they want it picked out for them.
Yeah.
They don't go and search out music. The average person can't be bothered. They don't have time.
That's why radio is so dominant.
So with something like Deezer or Spotify, are listeners gonna just basically go and look for what they already know? Is there a way of pointing them in the direction that can be easier, and that can that doesn't work like, if you like this, not the Amazon way. There's got to be something that is even more encouraging and easy and streamlined, and that we can utilize. I think that's what the music industry is really hungry for. Analytics are good, but if people don't listen to it in the first place, then it doesn't matter if it's like one person listening in Lithuania.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that respect, there's the usual fight between, it's not a fight, but it's more like different advocates that are advocating human curation versus machine curation, and any sort of level in between. And what's your stance on that? Do you think,
And I think nothing beats human curation.
So in that sense, is that why Pandora is so successful as a business as well? Like, do you think that might be a part of it? Because I have so many people.
I think Pandora is probably successful for many different reasons. It's a lot of the time it has to do with being the first in a territory.
Yeah.
It's difficult to compete overall, because if you're the first to a market and you get a big chunk of the audience, it's like I was just saying to somebody, it's like very few people change banks.
Yeah. And
I think with music services, I'm afraid that it could be quite similar. I mean, once you've kind of dedicated your time to making playlists and building up this big library and everything, unless you can just very seamlessly switch it to another service, chances are you're going to stick with that.
Yeah.
So I think with Pandora, I mean, Pandora obviously is more of a radio thing, but because they were first to market, I think they've managed to, grab a big chunk. And then you get a lot of Americans spend a lot of time in their cars.
Of course. And in terms of like pure streaming radio, it just seems the UK is in a particularly interesting place where even like non-on-demand radio, if it's internet-based, it has fixed rates that are so much higher. And it just seems like the Pandora argument is one thing. And of course, Pandora needs, I think at this point, needs to make it on its own as a business without the rates having to come down. I think a lot of people are telling me, that their impression is for Pandora, maybe the rates are a little high, but Pandora also needs to work on its business model to make sure that it can break even.
Absolutely, but I also think that if you're then competing, you have to look at advertising. I mean, obviously, comparing internet radio, it depends on how you're comparing it to commercial radio. Are you comparing it to the BBC?
Exactly.
Those are different entities, rates that are being paid, and if you're comparing it to commercial radio, then you're thinking, how often do you have to listen to ads on commercial radio? And how often do you have to listen to ads on Pandora?
Yeah, sure.
And I think that the reason that there's a couple of reasons why there's a lot of resistance at the moment against Pandora is that I think artists are not feeling that Pandora is in this together with the artists.
Yeah.
If there was a better, if they were better at communicating and actually coming to and being more open to a discussion instead of taking people to court.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then, I think that because everyone wants music, the digital space to succeed. I mean, and people want their music to be heard. And
so it was mostly a PR disaster on their part to release those artist numbers that were so high, and then the day after file a motion to slash the rates. Really, it wasn't very well thought out. Really.
No, and I think in the end, I mean, artists are very sensitive. I mean, obviously they're sensitive about their paycheck, and their royalties, and being taken advantage of, and it would be. I mean, the music industry, say 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, was a pretty kind of dodgy place. And I don't think the music industry is not like that anymore.
No.
There's a lot more transparency and a lot more leverage. The artists have a lot more leverage in it when it comes to labels and publishers, and it would really, really suck if then somebody else comes in and takes the place of that dodgy label.
Absolutely. So let's end by saying, anything else, anything you're particularly excited about to see at Midem, or anything that you hope to see at Midem?
I'm just excited about having conversations about, because there's so many interesting things happening for the music industry. And I think the next few years are going to be so crucial because we're kind of, right now it's all in disarray and people are trying to figure out how is the revenue going to work? How is it going to be divided? How are we going to, retain our rights? And slowly but surely things are setting themselves up to be positive. I mean, we're seeing little kind of seeds of hope because it's been so depressing for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And I think, if we could just get to grip with some of the kind of with illegal, because that's one thing that I do want to say, that I think I support legal sites, and I support companies like Spotify and Deezer or whatever that are trying to actually work with the music industry and is trying to make money.
Yeah.
They're obviously trying to make money too, but they're not going to keep it all for themselves. But how are they going to compete with this huge part of the internet where there is no law at all, and where it's an old cliche that people always bring up, but if there's a shop next door that is giving the stuff away, it's very difficult to sell it.
Yeah. And at that point, it's just going to be a question of convenience, price point, and distribution of the channels, right?
Yeah, and I think we're getting to the point now where actually access is becoming, for the music industry, certainly, we've made huge strides in making.
4 years,
in making music accessible legally. So that it's becoming less and less of an excuse to say, "Oh well, I can't get it, so I'm gonna go and steal it."
Yeah, exactly. Well, fingers crossed, and thanks so much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
That's great. Thank you.